Hey, it's Marcus here with just an additional little disclosure for this episode, in addition to the standard ones that you'll hear or read at the end of the episode. Justin and I are not lawyers with expertise in wills and estates, and none of the following should be construed as legal advice. Rather, the intention of the following discussion is to get you thinking about an important area of your financial planning. What happens when you die? Nothing talked about as a specific recommendation, as everyone's situation is different, but rather suggestion to do something rather than to do nothing. Throughout the conversation, any discussions around current legislation or processes pertain primarily to the province of Alberta. While there may be some similarities, there are slight variations between various provinces and significant variations with the province of Quebec or anywhere else in the world. Lastly, Canaccord Genuity Corp and Willful are separate and unaffiliated firms and are not responsible for each other's services or policies. This material should not be construed as a recommendation or endorsement of any particular product, service, or firm. So to clarify, this is not an endorsement of Willful services in particular, nor is there any kind of referral arrangement, nor referral codes given. It's only mentioned as a viable option alongside others to be considered. With that, enjoy this episode. Is there an example, like think of some celebrity who died without a will?
Oh, there's always
Prince.
those, like Prince. Prince was a big
Prince
famous
died
one.
without a will?
I believe he did not. Yeah. I think
We
we
don't have
actually
a
used
will?
him as an example last time. So I don't know what the weather is like in Edmonton right now, but I imagine like spring is starting to come back again. It's generally a very positive time of year. And notwithstanding the news that's out there right now and the headlines, sometimes that causes a little bit of stress or just like, what the heck is going on in this world right now? But it's generally a positive time of year, right? Mentally, spiritually, maybe hopefully financially as well, right?
With this very positive, hopeful, uplifting opening,
To offset the news, yeah.
To offset a real downer of a conversation today, which is death.
The circle of life.
Yeah, we got to talk about it. Everyone, it happens to everyone eventually. That's something really, you come to realize, I guess, as you get older. I'm starting to realize it, being middle-aged. I never thought about it, maybe even as little as 5 years ago. I mean, obviously, your parents are going to pass away. My grandparents are all long gone. You kind of experience that, but then you think about yourself too.
My parents are still alive.
Yep.
Are still alive. Both my grandfathers passed away before I was born, but I went to both my grandmother's funerals, and then a cousin, and so those are very impactful, but not at a young age. They happened when I was as an adult, but I think I'm a human, and I know, my parents are healthy. They're older. They're healthy, but it inevitably will happen, and I actually honestly don't know how I'm going to deal with that, right? So, but there's a lot of other things to prepare for, right? Not just the mental, emotional side, but in our world, in our context, what we can do to help people maybe focus on those things and less on the the administration and the other stuff, right? The paperwork that happens when that time happens.
Yeah, we were just talking before we started this call about how we as financial advisors, we're privy to so much about our clients and, whatever that might be. If there's things going on in their lives or, the process of losing a loved one and going through the estate process and all that. I can't even count how many times I have had clients die now in the 18 years or so that I've been doing this.
I had my first client pass away last year. And it was they're younger than us.
Wow.
Right.
Wow.
And that hit me a lot, because it was just like we're working towards these goals. We're saving diligently. We have a purpose. There's a plan. There's a plan for this, right? And then that individual's case, it never came to fruition. It never got fully realized. And so and like I said, they were younger than I was, and that was my first. And it definitely made an impact.
That's the thing too. You realize it's not all everybody gets really old and then dies in their 80s or 90s. You see every scenario. I mean, fairly early on, I think circa 2010, when I was still at the bank, I had a client die intestate, which means without a will. He wasn't married, didn't have kids, and was in his 40s probably, and died in a car crash. It was the first time I had a client die in like such an accident, really, completely unexpected. Wasn't sick, wasn't old. And just all of a sudden, I got notification from his father, who was the administrator of his estate and also the beneficiary of the estate. That's the first time I learned that when someone dies without a will, when the province makes the decisions on who is the administrator, who is the beneficiary, in a situation like that, which is in a situation not unlike my own if I were to die, the beneficiary of the estate basically it flows up to the parents, and then to the siblings if the parents are no longer there. And so I would have thought it made more sense if it goes straight to the siblings, but. So that was, one. Well, before that, it was usually almost always the wife, the widowed wife, coming in to inform me of the husband dying. There's one case early on where husband and wife were clients, fairly new clients of mine, still at the bank, and all of a sudden, one time they both came in and they informed me he was going to die, that he had pancreatic cancer, and that was it, and they made sure. Everything was, put in place. If things were not joint, they were made joint. Beneficiaries were all proper as they expected. And of course, they made sure they had a will and all that kind of stuff. Obviously, that's an unusual situation too, where someone has the opportunity to know when they're going to die and to put all that stuff in place. You and me, we don't expect to die anytime soon, but you never know. It can completely happen unexpectedly. And
I've come to recognize we're not invincible.
Yeah.
Right? Like even at our age, like we're not 20, we're not 30, we're in our 40s, but we're not invincible. And there became a time where it wasn't the grandmas and grandpas or the aunts and uncles or the parents. It was my peers, my friends, people that we knew, right? Between my wife and I, who are getting diagnosed with conditions and situations, and it's like oh, like oh man, like, oh, we're here. We're here. It's not them, it's us. Actually, just an hour and a half ago, I had a conversation with a client, and the topic of wills came up. And so it becomes more so, maybe we get more used to it because of, what we do on the conversations that we have. But for many people, it's just one of those things where like, I'll get to it. It's the one that I'll get to it. Yeah, don't worry. But at one point, it's a day too late.
I think that's what we kind of want to get at with this conversation today is getting to it. And, oftentimes there is simply that friction of, I'll get around to it eventually. My own personal experience, just, in the last little while here, I finally, and I've been telling clients, hypocrite that I am, I've been telling clients, you got to have a will, you got to have a power of attorney, you have to do all this stuff. I never actually.
I'm raising my hand.
For myself. Do you have a will? You don't have a will?
No. And we've talked about it. We've talked about it. We've talked to my siblings, or my sibling, my sister, and my brother-in-law, and I'm sure Angie, my wife, has also talked with her siblings, and in terms of the children and things of that nature. We got the things in place. We have insurance. We know where, right, and all that. But have we actually signed that document or gotten that final documentation, or that version 1.0?
With me, I was actually originally cold contacted from Willful, they do an online will kits.
Okay.
And this was years ago. It was during the pandemic, I think, when they contacted me and sort of gave me this idea. I mean, they contacted me as
pandemic. You should get a will.
Not completely randomly, but as a financial planner, they contacted me. And they have a sort of a deal where they're offering, or they were offering a referral bonus for financial planners referring their clients.
Gotcha,
I never actually did it because I think there's a little bit of a conflict of interest there, or at least, would require some paperwork if we're profiting from that. So we don't do that. But I did sign up for myself, or I can't remember if they gave me a discount or what, but I signed up and I completed a lot of the information online. They have a nice online portal where you go through the steps, you put in who you want your executor to be, your beneficiaries, that kind of stuff. And I signed up for the package where you get will, power of attorney, and personal care directive. I just checked online. The cost of that is $189 for one person, and there's a discount for a couple. So it's not too expensive. A typical will with a lawyer, you're looking at over $1,000 usually.
And so, in terms of your diligence of the product itself, relative to one of those like fill in the blank things that we used to say, like just don't buy that thing that's on the shelf of the bookstore.
The DMV. Yeah.
Like
I've never looked at a will kit before. I have seen many wills, of course, from clients.
Better than nothing, maybe arguably.
It absolutely is better than nothing. And to back up, originally, I did have a will prior to this. I did have a
Oh,
holograph will. So
there you go. Oh, okay. Yeah.
if you look at
Tell us what a holographic will
let's
is,
let's look
Marcus.
at let's step back and look at
Yeah.
let's say there's three ways to die. One is
Dumb ways to die. Did you ever watch
dumb
that
ways to
video
die.
from like Australia? Sorry.
One is you die completely without any type of will. You never decided ever to put anything down on paper as to what you want to have happen with either your assets or your kids after you die. Or you trust the province. The province will do that, take care of that for you. And I looked at the Alberta Wills and Successions Act and kind of what happens. And in most cases, it's pretty fair and straightforward. For yourself, Justin, I think if you have no will, you die, your wife is going to be the administrator of your estate, and your estate gets split between her and your kids. It's probably what you'd want anyways. There's no complication there. Myself, like I said, I'm in a situation like that one client of mine where I would not want my estate to flow up to my father because he, as much as I like him, he's in his late 70s and he doesn't need or want the money of my estate. Really, the one who would benefit the most of that is my sister and her family. So if it flows up to my dad, I mean, I'm sure if that were to happen, he'd just gift it right to them. But if the situation were such as, maybe he's in the hospital and infirm and, my estate goes to him and then he dies a month or a couple of months later, it all becomes part of his estate then. And then it flows to my sister and her family. That would not be efficient. But all that aside, I wanted to make sure that my estate flows mostly to my sister and her family. That's why years ago I did do a holograph will. So we talked about the first way to die is completely without any type of will. You die intestate, and the province makes all the decisions there. And it's usually logical, but sometimes it might not go the way you'd want it to.
Life is rarely purely logical.
Yeah.
I think Spock found that out pretty quickly.
If you have kids especially, what if your closest kin, let's say you have a sibling and most likely the province is going to designate your kids to be under their guardianship, but you don't like them. You think they'd be terrible parents, but you have a cousin perhaps who'd be better parent. Or you have multiple siblings and there's one particular sibling who'd be a better parent than the other or whatever. That kind of stuff, you'd want to be able to dictate that in a will. So the first layer of actually doing something is a holograph will. And one thing we wanted to talk about today too is, get rid of that friction, do something, don't just put it off. If you don't want to spend one penny at this and you just want to sit down for 15 minutes with a pen and a piece of paper, write a holograph will. If a holograph will, the entire will has to be written by hand. Doesn't have to be fancy handwriting, just has to be written in your printing and signed by you. It doesn't need a witness either, but it's written entirely by you, signed by you. It designates an executor to take care of your estate. It has to designate that it's your last will and testament and revoke any previous will. So that type of stuff, and signed, and of course designate beneficiaries. And that is not perfect, and it's not recommended either, but it's better than nothing.
And you have a framework to then evolve it over time and build off of it, right? You're not starting from zero. Like everything, once you start, you're half done, as they say, right? You're like, you have something at least in place, and then over time, adjust as your life goes accordingly, or do that next step.
Make those adjustments. And that's the nice thing about it too, is it's cheap, it's free. You just crumple it up, or I'd say shred it, and write a new one. You don't have to talk to a lawyer or anyone. You don't have to find some witnesses. But again, it's if there's a lot of if there's even modest complexity to your estate, I would say make sure you are doing a proper will. And that's kind of the next level. And that's what a company like Willful does. So the difference between a holograph will and a formal will is that the formal will is entirely typed up. It's not written in your hand. It follows more formal legal language. And at the end of the day, too, it is signed by you and witnessed by two witnesses. And so that's the requirement. If it is not a holograph will, if it's typed out, it has to be witnessed by two witnesses. They have to actually witness you signing it. Now, that is something, again, you can do with a will kit. You can do with an online service like Willful. I found, again, from my experience, seeing a lot of actual wills that people have done with lawyers, comparing that to the one I did myself with Willful, the Willful will is pretty complete and pretty comprehensive. Okay. And the verbiage in it is very, very much the same.
Mm-hmm.
I found it even in some ways to be a bit more comprehensive, but I figure that's maybe just because I haven't seen too many recently written wills.
Mm-hmm.
So one thing I noticed in this thing, even though I don't have kids, there is an actual section in it for RESPs.
Mm.
And in a couple of cases, I've seen in my experience where the RESP was not mentioned at all in a will,
Okay.
caused some complications. And there was also a section on digital assets. So what happens
Oh,
with,
that's an excellent point. Yes.
yeah, logins, passwords, cryptocurrency, if I ever had any.
Your
but
cold wallet address. Yeah. Yeah. The passwords to your iCloud or your Google Drive or what have
mhm,
you,
mhm.
right? In order to, those thousands of photos you end up taking, because I'm sure everybody will want to keep them, right? No,
Yeah.
but more so, like, your emails, the access to that. We live in a more and more digital world, obviously, and they recommend you to have a different password for every single site and
Mhm.
service, and to have those collected, and being able to access them. Yes, it's certainly something that has become much more important, or to document that, than what used to be in the past. So that is that I'm quite intrigued, or interested, or pleased to hear that they have one section for that. So I imagine then it's like, here's the website and here's the your user ID and password. Is that sort of how it goes? And you just list them all down, and this is what's in there, or
No,
who gets
you don't
access to
list
them?
them all. No, you don't list
Okay.
them all because obviously they can change all the time.
Yeah. Oh, I guess
Um,
so. You're right. Yeah.
but I
Every
think
6 months, every 3 months. Yeah.
one important thing that's in there is that in this will, I give authority to the executor to take over those online accounts, and
Yes.
I think that's an
Yes.
important thing too because simply having your closest kin log into your Gmail and everything
Hmm.
and access that stuff. That's usually what happens. Like I'll be honest, in a situation with my mother, and I've mentioned this in a past podcast that I lost my mother in 2023, and this was a case as well where it was cancer, and she knew, or she had a runway in which she knew when it was going to happen,
Yep.
or something
Yep.
was going to happen. So she prepared and wrote down all our passwords and posted them on post-it notes on a wall.
Mm.
And so after she went, my father and I were able to log into things and make sure any emails to if people are sending emails still and they haven't been informed that they were, stuff like that, photo albums, whatnot,
Yes.
as
Yes.
well.
Mm.
But we didn't have authority to do that technically. Well, really,
Mm, I
we
understand.
didn't have
Yes.
authority. So I mean,
Yeah.
you're breaking the user agreement or whatever of whatever online services if you're doing that. If no one has, if the
Yeah.
deceased hasn't actually given authority, so
Uh huh.
that's where this will actually gives that authority to the executor. And if they needed to get the password, if that service is willing to provide it in such a situation, they can say, look, I've got this person's deceased and they've designated me the authority to look after their digital stuff. And then maybe that will allow them. I can't guarantee that it would, but at least it gives
Hmm.
them something on paper that they have
Your
that authority,
intention. Your
and
intention
not
of,
someone
yes.
else, right?
That's right. Yeah.
And that's
Oh,
why it's important too. I mean, maybe you have certain family members that you wouldn't trust with, having access to your Gmail after you die,
maybe
and you
you
want to
don't
make
want them to
sure.
see that. Maybe there's something in there that you
Yeah,
don't want them to
exactly.
share.
Yeah, yeah, and
Yeah.
you have your trusted executor who you do want to have access to
Yeah.
that, and you want to make sure that they secure that after your death.
Yeah.
That kind of stuff's important now. So yeah, again, I don't see that in any of the legal wills that I get from in situations where clients have passed away.
Yes.
But that is usually because those wills were written years ago,
A
and
little
that
bit dated.
stuff
Yeah.
wasn't taken into account.
Is there something else that you think that could be that was included that you haven't mentioned yet?
Not in the case of my will, but I mean, really,
Hmm.
it's the digital thing. I think is something people should consider writing an addendum
Yeah.
for, codicil or whatever.
Yeah, to their
Um,
existing will. And yeah, that's right. It's just
yeah,
an additional,
yeah,
and you're not changing the other beneficiary information or what have you. It just gives you permission, as you said, access, granting that authority.
and it really fills in some information where none is currently. So it's not, yeah, like you said, it's not changing something, but
Hmm.
it's filling in. And that's something too that people kind of overlook. The will is a legal document. It doesn't have to end at just the will. You can write a letter too, file it with the will with information.
Make a
Um,
video,
make a video
only,
even. Yeah,
or
yeah.
not a video these days, but like
The,
only watch when.
the way
Yes.
put a YouTube link in, put it
Yeah.
on YouTube, and then provide the short link with your will, and it will kind of
Yeah.
you lead the person to that video. The video will be there forever. But a letter, just basically describing what your intent is. So, you've got the legal will, but then you can also just write something. It doesn't contradict in any way what's in the will, but just sort of explains, this is why I chose so-and-so to be the executor and to get this and that. And or some guidance as well, some advice and recommendations for things.
Yeah.
For example, I maybe I mentioned this before. I mentioned in my my blog post on how I invest my money. The thing that surprises people is I have a bunch of silver bullion. Did I mention that to you at all?
Beside your bullets. Yeah, we've talked about this before.
And it's not necessarily all bullion too. So, my advice.
Yeah, your collectibles, your collectable coins. And
some of it's collectible. Yeah. Now, if someone doesn't know, they're going to take that all to a bullion dealer and get, spot price of silver minus whatever the dealer takes. Mm-hmm. But some of those coins are worth quite a bit more. That's the kind of advice I'd want to include in a letter. Don't take my coins to a bullion dealer. Some are worth looking at listing on eBay or whatever, because you might get more money for them. Or if they don't care about it,
Pokemon coins and the Pokemon cards and the hockey cards and the everything that everyone's been collecting over the last since pandemic, right? When you're at a time, or your survivors, your family, your friends, the ones that you've left behind, are grieving and are dealing with this loss, to comfort them in some senses, but also to minimize the difficulty in getting those necessary legal procedures, estate procedures complete. If you can help facilitate that prior to your passing, that's almost, if I can say so, from what I understand, it's a gift in and of itself to the executor and to the family, because then there's, if it's well done, no arguments. There's less.
I think people also really underestimate the complexity and how hard it is to actually handle an estate. And that's one thing too that's worth mentioning again. When you're designating an executor, it's not surprise. Guess what? You're my executor. Aren't you honored? Yeah. You're creating. You're basically giving someone a pretty hard job to do. And
a tangled web.
Something too. People kind of think of. Oftentimes, it's husband and wife couple, and when they do their wills, they name each other as executors, and then once both have passed, it's usually a child or joint executors, children, or someone else they just randomly decide to name executor. Yeah. But they don't realize when one of them dies, it is extremely simple and straightforward. So again, personal experience here. When my mom passed away, we basically went into the bank, signed a few things, and all of a sudden the joint accounts were single. And investment accounts, a few things were signed, flow to the beneficiary. Yeah. Very, very straightforward. And there was no house to be sold. And at the end of the day, there really wasn't an estate per se. So the will never even really came into question. When my father passes away, it's going to be a lot more complex, and I'm the executor of that. And I know what I'm in for, and my parents knew choosing me. I'm a financial professional and can handle that. Yeah. But maybe that's not always the case where parents have a financial planner as a child who they can designate.
Absolutely.
Or if you have a sibling or someone else you can designate who has the capacity and the time to do it. Mm-hmm. I had one situation where a client passed away, no family, basically named a coworker his executor. Oh. And she didn't expect it. She came to me.
It was a surprise. Oh boy.
Yeah. She ended up just basically, and there's outs, of course. She ended up hiring a law firm to basically take over this.
Professional execution. Yeah.
Yeah. But you might think it's just simple and straightforward, but if you're leaving behind a house, you're leaving behind accounts all over the place. Maybe you have a bunch of possessions. And it may not be that simple and straightforward. So make sure that whoever you name executor knows about it. And that is actually something that Willful does too, is you basically put their information in there and click a button and it notifies the executor. You've been named executor of the will.
Oh, yes.
And then they also provide kind of, I guess, might go to the spam folder, but they also provide you the ability to file your will with the will registry as well. And so that's just an extra,
Okay.
back. You're not actually uploading the document. You're just basically registering it there and
Yeah.
where the will is located.
Gotcha.
That's
They know it
included in the
exists.
cost.
Yeah.
Yep. If you're talking about
Wow.
willful, I just want to disclose as well. We don't have a referral arrangement with them, and there are probably other options out there. They were just the ones I chose because they approached me.
Hmm.
And it just basically, I recommend looking at them if you're not ready to spend whatever the cost is to see a lawyer to get a will done. If the cost of getting a legal will done with a lawyer is prohibitive, then you
Yeah.
should look at these alternative things. And if even that $189 is prohibitive, then at least look at a holograph will or a will
Yeah.
kit at the library, whatever.
Hmm. Hmm.
I know the registry agents, they have them.
Now, when you
Um,
completed this, and I'm sure you'll be updating it again in the future when you feel you need to. But how
mhm.
did you feel after you did it, during it, and then also when you submitted it and it was like completed as a document? Did it feel like I'm more mature, or like a weight off my shoulder, or like
I
you know
did a
what?
big boy thing.
Yeah, I adulted or something. Like, yeah,
Did
how
some
did like
adulting,
honestly,
yeah.
how
I
did you
middle
feel about
aged.
that?
um,
Maybe that's all it is.
I'm flying to Uzbekistan next month, so I wanted to make sure I have a will. I mean, granted, air travel, despite what you might feel watching the news lately, air
Yeah.
travel is by miles and miles the safest form of transportation. There's a
Hmm.
greater risk for me getting off the plane in Tashkent, taking a taxi, than there is on the however many 1,000-mile journey there.
Hmm.
But it is good to have because yeah, anything can happen. And of course, I think too about next of kin, and that all the stuff I do in my life, the money I make, that
Hmm.
down the road it benefits someone or something.
Hmm.
The something
Hmm.
is also worth considering, and Willful does provide
Charity,
some steps for that as well. The something being, what
philanthropic.
if everyone in your life dies? Where does the money go
Hmm.
to then? What if we're
Hmm.
all on a big happy family vacation and we're on a plane and it crashes or goes missing? You know, what happens then? And
Yeah.
there's a place in my will where it designates the money to be split between some charities.
Okay.
So that's also, and that in proper estate planning, you have to think of that stuff. You have to think of, first of all, you, Justin, if you die, you have one scenario. That's scenario A. Everything goes to your wife, and
Yep.
she takes care of the kids, and so on and so on. Scenario B is you and your wife die. Then what happens to your kids? Scenario 3 is you and your wife and your kids all die, which is really gruesome to think about, but you have to think about that.
Hmm. It is sobering in a lot of
Mm-hmm.
ways. In
Mm-hmm.
many ways, it'll make you ask yourself some difficult questions. Maybe they're easy to answer, but it forces you to think about that. And as much as it may be icky. I guess going back to like what I first brought up, like winter comes. We know that winter eventually comes,
Mm-hmm.
and we know that eventually all of us leave this earth. It is something that is obviously one of the first questions we bring up during a financial illustration or a planning session, right? Is that, do you have a will? Do you have the personal directive? Do you have all that sort of idea, right? And there's a reason for that. So. Huh.
Yep, and that stuff too was included: personal care directive, power of
Yeah.
attorney. So they're pretty complete. Again, consider an online service like that if you have a fairly straightforward will. And I think most of us, a majority of the population does have a fairly straightforward situation. You kind of touched a little bit on those modern families. There's complications,
Mm.
kids from previous marriages, or just different non-traditional families in one way or another.
Yep.
You definitely should speak to a properly experienced lawyer in wills and estates, where they can kind of think of what are potential pitfalls. They have that
Yeah.
experience too, and this comes to almost all the advice we give. We know about tax, but we're not the tax experts. We're not the law experts, because there are people out there that are involved in litigation and who are
Hmm.
involved in filing taxes and what the repercussions are of that too if something goes wrong. They
Yeah.
know They know what can go wrong from experience, the stuff that we don't know, because we know the theory.
Yep.
We refer to those experts in those particular cases. So if it is a modestly complex estate, look at speaking to a lawyer. And then even there, in some cases, a lawyer might really just do not much more than what a will kit does, where they have a template, a paralegal puts it all together, and so on and so on. But then you have some who will be able to handle those more complex situations. They'll charge by the hour. The cost could be in the thousands.
Yep.
And at least, spending a few $1,000s on a properly done will, your eventual estate can save tens of thousands of dollars that could be lost due to litigation or whatnot.
Not frivolous at all. No, exactly.
Yeah.
Maybe you've persuaded me, but yes, we've had to talk about it as a family, as a couple, because of other deaths in the larger extended family. It comes up periodically again with the peers and the colleagues and the friends, and so it's not as if these conversations are completely taboo or ignored. It's just that you want to formalize it, right? And that's maybe my takeaway on this today, is that by the time this goes live and is published, that I'll have another conversation with my spouse and my wife, and to say, let's that thing we've been kind of talking about for a while, and we've kind of have all the foundation in the guidelines of it. Let's just actually do it, right?
Yeah,
so
get
thank
it
you,
done.
Marcus.
Yep.
Thank you for that. I'll go back. Like, the sun is shining right now. The weekend's fast approaching. I am still going to be mentally thinking about springtime and hockey playoffs, I guess, and all the other joys that come with, it finally, winter being officially over, right? But I will think about, yes, like I said, I'll commit to having this conversation again with my wife, and seeing, how soon or when those next steps will come to be. So wonderful. Thank you for sharing. Thanks for sharing the experience. And it's one of many methods, as you said, right?
Yep.
It's just one that you went through and you utilized.
Yeah, and again, to disclose once again, neither of us are experts in wills and estates. The reason we share this really is exactly that, just to sort of let people know how easy it is. The process was extremely easy, even though I delayed for several years before I actually finalized, printed out stuff, got it signed.
Yes.
But get rid of that friction. That's really the gist behind this podcast episode is, if you haven't done any of this, take at least the baby steps. Think about who, especially in a situation like yours, Justin, think of who takes care of your kids if both of you die.
Yep.
I think anyone with kids, you should have a will. As soon as you have kids, have a will where you can designate that kind of stuff. If you don't care about what happens with your money, whatever, or maybe you're underwater in your mortgage anyways, and you don't have a net worth. Don't let that be the deciding factor of whether or not you get a will done. So anyways,
thank you.
Gonna leave it at that, and we will try in a future episode to bring someone who's more of an authority on estate planning on. Again, we've had him before, Jeff Haggerty. We don't have him on this episode. We wanted to bring him on, but just on the basis of it's Friday and he's gone home.
Because it's almost springtime. Yeah, I would agree with that sentiment. Excellent. Well, enjoy the weekend. We'll talk next time.
Yep.